Robert Crane, Detective Webb said, died on a Tuesday morning in Seattle 7 years ago. Cardiac event. Sudden. The doctors said these things happen. He paused. They do, he said. But not always for the reasons the doctors think. The courtroom was completely still. Maya sat in the front row of the public gallery with her hands folded in her lap and her spine straight and listened. Junho was on her left, his arm against hers, the specific warmth of a man who had arrived early and chosen this seat deliberately. Dorothy was on her right, small and upright, silver hair close to her head, hands folded with the composed certainty of a woman who had been waiting for this morning for a very long time. Mr. Ortiz was at the table, his leather briefcase open, documents arranged with the precision of a man who had been preparing for this hearing for 3 months and had left nothing to chance. Eugene sat at the defense table with her attorney. Her silver hair was in its severe bun. Her posture was the controlled bearing it had always been. She had not looked at Maya when Maya came in. Maya had noticed. Detective Webb looked at the court with the measured attention of a man who had carried something for 22 years and was finally setting it down in the right place. Robert Crane was 64 years old, he said. Retired architect. Comfortable estate. No children. He had been married for 7 months when he died. His wife's name at the time of his death was Han Eugene. Something moved through the courtroom. Not a sound. Simply a shift in the quality of the air. The specific shift that happens when a room full of people understand simultaneously that what they are hearing is larger than they expected. Maya did not look at Eugene. She looked at Detective Webb and listened. The investigation into Crane's death was closed within 6 weeks. Webb continued. Inconclusive findings. No evidence of foul play. His estate passed entirely to his wife per the terms of a will amended 4 months after their marriage. He paused. I was a junior detective in Seattle at the time. I looked at the financials of Robert Crane's estate and felt something that my training told me to file under instinct pending evidence. He looked at the court directly. I never let it go, he said. He walked them through it the way he had walked Maya through it in her father's kitchen 14 months ago, methodically and without decoration. The 7 years of documentation. The pattern he had identified and followed across 2 cities and 2 dead men. The property management structures. The shell accounts. The truck driver paid in cash whose transaction traced back through 2 layers of financial architecture to a company registered in Eugene's name. The medical record showing the specific pattern of Thomas Johnson's declining health in the months before his death, consistent with cumulative supplement interference, consistent with what a careful person might do to someone they needed to appear to be dying naturally. He spoke for 40 minutes. The courtroom did not move. Maya listened to every word. She had known pieces of this story before today. She had known enough to understand what had been done and who had done it. But sitting in this room and hearing it assembled into the formal language of consequence, hearing it delivered by a man who had spent 22 years refusing to let it go, was different from knowing it privately. It was different in a way she had not anticipated and was not going to manage her way through. She was going to feel it completely and stay upright anyway. She felt Junho beside her. The steadiness of him. The complete quiet presence he had been bringing to every room she needed him in for 3 months. She did not look at him. She did not need to. When Detective Webb finished, he looked at the gallery. His eyes found Maya for one moment, the specific look of a man delivering the full weight of something to the person it was always intended for, and then moved on. He stepped down from the stand with the unhurried, settled walk of a man who had finished exactly what he came to do. Now, if you have been with Maya since room 412 and you felt something move in that courtroom just now, you are exactly where this story needs you. Because what comes next is the testimony that is going to reach into this courtroom and not let go. Subscribe right now if you have not already, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me. Did you know Detective Webb had been carrying this for 7 years? Stay with me. Dorothy Charles stood up. She was small in the courtroom the way small women who have lived fully are small. Not diminished, simply concentrated. She walked to the stand with the unhurried uprightness of a woman who had nothing to perform and nothing to hide, and had arrived at an age where she understood the difference between those two things completely. She sat down, looked at the court, looked at the judge, looked briefly at Eugene at the table with the specific look of a woman completing an assessment she had begun the first time she heard that name from Thomas Johnson's mouth 5 years ago, and was finishing it now in the only room where finishing it meant something permanent. Then she looked at Mr. Ortiz and said she was ready. He asked her to describe her relationship with Thomas Johnson. She almost smiled. 50 years, she said. We grew up in the same neighborhood in Sacramento. I knew him before he knew himself. She paused. I watched him become who he was. That is a different kind of knowing than most people get with each other. She told the court about Thomas Johnson the way only someone who had known him for 50 years could tell it. Not about the estate. Not about the finances. About the man. About the specific quality of someone who had driven to Los Angeles at 22 years old with $40 and a suitcase because he had decided that was where he was supposed to be, and had never once doubted that decision. About the man who had walked into a foster agency one morning not entirely sure what he was doing and walked out knowing exactly who he was, walking out with the specific certainty of a man who had just found the thing he did not know he had been looking for. She told the court about the Sunday phone calls. Every week, she said. For 50 years. Without fail. I could tell you what his voice sounded like on every kind of Sunday there is. Good Sundays. Hard Sundays. The Sunday his mother died. The Sunday Maya graduated. The Sunday he called me from a payphone on his first night in Los Angeles, broken, exhausted, and completely certain he had made the right decision. She paused. I knew his voice the way you know something you have been listening to your whole life. She told them about the tiredness. It started about 8 months before he died, she said. I noticed it in his voice before he mentioned it to me. Thomas was not a tired man. He had more energy than people half his age, and he knew it and was quietly proud of it. When that changed, I noticed. She paused. He mentioned it once briefly on a Sunday call. Said he had been to the doctor and everything was fine. Said Eugene had adjusted some of his supplements. Added a few things. Said it would help with his energy levels. He laughed about it. Said she fussed over him like he was made of glass. She looked at her hands for a moment. The courtroom waited. I laughed too, she said. Because what else do you do when your oldest friend tells you his wife is taking care of him? You laugh. You are glad he has someone. You file the thing you noticed away because nothing is wrong yet, and you do not want to be the kind of person who looks for trouble in the happiness of someone you love. She looked up. I should have asked more questions, she said. Her voice was completely steady. I know that. I have known it since the morning I got the call that he was gone. I have carried that every day since. She paused. But I am here today because there is one thing I did right. When he called me on that Sunday 10 weeks before he died and said, Dorothy, I need you to keep something for me, I did not ask why. I drove to Los Angeles the next morning and I took what he gave me and I kept it exactly the way he asked me to keep it. She paused. Because 50 years of friendship means you do not need to ask why. He gave me the notebook, she said. Brown cover. His handwriting inside. Dates in the left margin. Observations on the right. The careful documentation of a man who trusted his instincts and was beginning to understand that his instincts were telling him something he needed to write down, even if he could not yet name it fully. He said, Dorothy continued, and I want the court to hear this exactly as he said it to me. He said my daughter sees things clearly. She always has. Trust her with this. She looked at the gallery. At Maya. Maya held her gaze. She did not look away. She did not manage her expression. She simply looked at the woman who had known her father for 50 years and had driven to Los Angeles without asking why and had kept the notebook exactly as he asked and had sat in a courtroom today and told the truth about who he was. He was right about you, Dorothy said. Not to the court. To Maya. Simply to Maya, directly, as if the courtroom had fallen away for one moment and there were only the two of them in the room. He was right about everything he said about you. The judge did not stop her. Nobody stopped her. The courtroom simply held the moment the way rooms hold the things that matter most in them, completely and without requiring anything further. Maya pressed her lips together. Her eyes were very bright. She did not look away. Dorothy looked back at the court. She answered the remaining questions from Mr. Ortiz with the patient directness of a woman who had nothing to qualify and no interest in being managed. Eugene's attorney cross-examined her briefly. Dorothy answered every question with the specific composure of a woman who had said everything she came to say, and was not going to be moved from a single word of it. When she returned to her seat, she covered Maya's hand with hers for one moment. Warm and certain and entirely steady. Maya looked at her. Dorothy looked straight ahead. Mr. Ortiz stood. He approached the bench with a single piece of paper in a clear protective sleeve and submitted it to the court as evidence. He described it briefly and precisely. A personal note written by Thomas Johnson in his own hand, dated 6 weeks before his death, addressed to his daughter Maya Johnson, delivered to her following his death per his specific instructions. He asked the court's permission to read it aloud. Permission was granted. He read it. Maya had read that note more times than she could count. She had read it in a hospital bed and in a courthouse corridor and at a kitchen table. She had unfolded it and placed it between herself and Junho, and watched him read every word of it with the complete attention he gave everything that mattered. She had folded it back along its original creases and put it in her pocket over her heart and carried it there for 3 months. She knew every word before Mr. Ortiz spoke them. She listened to every word anyway. Her father had written them and they were being read aloud in a courtroom, and the formal record of this day was going to contain his voice, and she was going to be present for that completely, every word, without managing what it cost her. Halfway through the note, Junho's hand found hers under the edge of the gallery bench. He did not look at her. She did not look at him. His hand simply found hers in the space between them and covered it with a complete quiet certainty he brought to everything he decided, and she turned her hand over and held it and looked straight ahead and listened to her father's words being read aloud in a room full of people. Mr. Ortiz finished reading. He folded the document carefully and returned to his seat. The courtroom was very still. Maya looked at Eugene. She had been watching her face all morning. Through Webb's testimony. Through Dorothy's words. She watched her now through the last line of the note, and she saw what she had come here to see. 1 degree. 1 fraction of shift in the set of Eugene's jaw and the quality of her eyes. The specific crack of a woman who had managed everything and had not managed this, had not managed the sound of Thomas Johnson's voice assembled in his own handwriting and delivered into the room where she was being held accountable for what she had done to him. Not at the sentence. At the words. At the man himself coming back into the room. Maya saw it. She did not react. She simply saw it and looked away. That was enough. That was exactly enough. And if you have stayed with Maya all the way to the end of this first half, then you already know that what is waiting in the second half is worth every second. The sentence is coming. And what happens between Maya and Junho when they walk out of that courthouse today is the moment this story has been building toward since the first morning in her father's kitchen. Subscribe right now if you have not already, hit that like button and drop a comment below telling me, what do you think Thomas Johnson wrote in that note? The best answer gets pinned. Stay right here. Part 2 of this episode is coming immediately. The judge delivered the sentence at 11:40 in the morning. The courtroom had the specific stillness of a room that has been moving toward a single moment for a long time and has finally arrived at it. Every person present understood what they were inside. The weight of it was visible in the way nobody moved, in the way the air itself seemed to be paying attention. Eugene stood. Her attorney stood beside her. Her posture was the same controlled bearing it had been across the entire length of this story, upright and managed and entirely composed. The posture of a woman who had spent 61 years refusing to let anyone see her bend and was not going to stop now simply because a judge was reading numbers and years into the formal record of her life. The judge spoke with the measured precision of someone delivering a verdict that the evidence had made inevitable, and who understood that inevitability was its own kind of gravity. He cited the financial fraud, the property manipulation, the systematic deception conducted over years against a man who had trusted completely and had that trust used against him in the most deliberate and calculated way possible. He cited Robert Crane in Seattle. He cited the truck driver. He cited the medical records. He cited the notebook. He cited Thomas Johnson's note. Maya sat completely still and listened to the sentence being delivered, and felt the specific feeling she had been carrying since the morning Dorothy placed a brown notebook on her father's kitchen table, and she understood for the first time the full shape of what had been done. Not rage. Not grief. Something older and more complete than either. The specific feeling of a truth that has been fought for arriving in the only place where it becomes permanent. She had done everything that needed to be done. Every piece of it. And it had arrived exactly where it was supposed to arrive. The judge finished speaking. Eugene's composure held. Maya had expected that. She had known since the corridor 3 months ago that Eugene's composure was the last thing she would surrender, and would not surrender it publicly regardless of what was happening around her. She was not wrong. Eugene stood and received the sentence with the stillness of a woman who had prepared for every visible moment, and was managing this one the way she had managed all the others. But Maya was watching her face. She had been watching it all morning and she was watching it now, and she saw the thing she had seen when Mr. Ortiz read the note, that one degree of fracture, that one involuntary shift in the quality of her eyes when the judge cited Thomas Johnson's note as a determining factor in the weight of the sentence. Not at the sentence itself. At the note. At the specific fact that her husband's own words, written in the last weeks of his life, had followed her into this room and had been part of what brought her here. Maya saw it. She did not react to it. She did not need to. She looked away from Eugene and looked at the high windows and the flat morning light coming through them, and thought about her father driving to Los Angeles at 22 years old with $40 and a suitcase and the complete certainty that he was going where he was supposed to go. She thought about a man who had built everything he had with patience and intention and genuine work, and had loved his daughter with the uncomplicated totality of someone who had chosen her deliberately and never once needed to be reminded of that choice. She thought about a small drawn circle at the bottom of a grocery list. 2 dots for eyes and a curved line for a mouth. Drawn quickly and casually without knowing it would one day be the last thing he left behind in that kitchen. She pressed her lips together, breathed once, slow and deliberate. Then she looked straight ahead and let the morning hold what it was holding. The courtroom began to move around her, the formal conclusion of proceedings, attorneys gathering documents, the low murmur of the room reassembling itself after the concentrated stillness of the last several hours. Eugene was guided toward a side door by 2 officers, her handbag still over her arm, her bun still severe, her coat still dark. She did not look at Maya. At the last moment, just before she reached the door, she stopped. She did not turn around fully. Simply paused, one hand near the door, her profile visible for a moment to the room. Her expression from this angle was not visible to most people in the courtroom. Maya could see it. It was not remorse. Maya had not expected remorse and did not require it. It was something else. The expression of a woman standing at the threshold of the consequence of her own choices and understanding, perhaps for the first time completely, that the choices had been real and the consequence was real, and the man she had made those choices about had been real, more real than she had allowed him to be while she was making them. Then she went through the door. It closed behind her. Maya looked at the closed door for a moment. Then she looked at the grocery list in her memory, patient and present and entirely itself, and she thought quietly and entirely to herself that her father had deserved better than what he got and had known it and had still chosen to believe in people anyway, and that was not weakness and had never been weakness. It was the thing that made him who he was. It was the thing that made him her father. Junho stood beside her. She had not noticed him rise. He was simply there, the way he was always simply there, present and unhurried and not requiring her to be anything other than what she was in this moment. She stood up. They walked out of the courtroom together. The Los Angeles afternoon met them at the top of the courthouse steps with the specific warmth of a California day that had decided to show up fully, The sky clear and enormous above the city, the light falling warm and direct across the stone steps and the street below, and the ordinary extraordinary life of a city that had seen everything and continued anyway. Mr. Ortiz was already on the steps. He turned when he heard them come through the door and looked at Maya with the expression of a man who had worked for Thomas Johnson for 20 years, and had spent the last 14 months working for his daughter, and had arrived at the outcome he had been building toward and was allowing himself the full quiet satisfaction of that. He took her hand in both of his. His grip was firm and warm and entirely certain. "It is done," he said. "All of it. Completely and permanently." He looked at her directly. "Your father built something real, Maya. And real things find their way to the people they belong to." He paused. "He would be very proud of today." She looked at him steadily. "Thank you," she said. "For 20 years with him. And for the last 14 months with me." He held her hand for a moment longer. Then he nodded once, picked up his briefcase, and walked down the courthouse steps into the Los Angeles afternoon with the unhurried, settled walk of a man who had finished exactly what he came to do. Detective Webb came through the door behind them. He stopped on the steps and looked at Maya and Junho standing together in the afternoon light. He looked at them the way he had looked at them across a kitchen table 14 months ago, with the careful attention of a man reading a room accurately and finding it exactly as it should be. He looked at Junho. Junho looked at him. Something moved between them, not the specific negotiation of two men from different worlds deciding to stand on the same side of something the way it had moved between them in the kitchen. Something quieter than that. The specific acknowledgement of two people who had done something together that mattered and were completing the transaction cleanly. Detective Junho said. Mr. C.O. Webb said. That was all. That was everything it needed to be. Webb looked at Maya. He looked at her with the expression of a man who had spent 22 years carrying something, and had set it down today in the right place and was feeling the full specific weight of that in a way he had not allowed himself to feel it before because it had not been finished before. Your father, he said, was the kind of man this city needs more of. He paused. I am glad we could do this for him. He held her gaze. I am glad you were awake for it. Maya looked at him. The specific weight of those last 4 words landing exactly where he intended them to land. Thank you, she said. For Seattle. For not letting it go 7 years ago when it would have been easier to let it go. She held his gaze. Thank you for that. Something moved in his face. He nodded once, the nod of a man receiving something he had needed to receive without knowing it. Then he picked up his folder and walked down the steps with the same unhurried, settled walk he always had. The walk of a man who had finished exactly what he came to do and was entirely at peace with that. Dorothy was at the bottom of the steps. She had come down ahead of them and was standing in the afternoon light with her leather satchel over one arm and her silver hair catching the sun and the specific upright composure of a woman who had delivered everything she came to deliver, and was waiting now for the part that came after. Maya came down the steps and Dorothy opened her arms and Maya walked into them. It was not a brief hug. It was the full, warm, certain embrace of a woman who had known Maya's father for 50 years and had driven from Sacramento with the leather notebook under her arm and had sat in a courtroom today and told the truth about who he was and was now holding his daughter in the Los Angeles afternoon sunlight and giving her the full weight of 50 years of love for the man who had raised her. Maya held on. She did not perform anything. She did not manage anything. She simply held on for as long as it took. When Dorothy pulled back, she held Maya's face in both hands for a moment and looked at her with complete directness, and said the thing she had been saving for exactly this moment. He used to say, Dorothy said quietly, that the best thing he ever did was the thing that felt the least like a decision. He said he walked into that agency and saw you across the room and thought, well, that is just my daughter. She just got here late. Maya looked at her. Her eyes were very bright. Dorothy smiled. The full, warm, helpless smile of a woman accessing something precious. He was right, Dorothy said. About all of it. About you. About what you would do with what he left you. About everything. She paused. He was almost always right. Maya almost smiled. Almost, she said softly. He was almost always right. Dorothy laughed. The full warm sound of it going out into the Los Angeles afternoon like something that belonged there. Then she looked over Maya's shoulder at Junho. He was standing at the top of the steps, giving them the space the moment needed, entirely present and entirely unhurried, the way he was present for everything that mattered. Dorothy looked at him for a long moment. The specific look of a woman who had been watching him across a courtroom all morning, and had completed her assessment, and was delivering the verdict of it now in the only currency that mattered between people who understood each other. She nodded once. Not a small nod. A full deliberate nod. The nod of a woman who had loved Thomas Johnson for 50 years, and was satisfied with what she saw standing at the top of those courthouse steps, and was saying so in the only way that needed no explanation. Junho held her gaze. He inclined his head slightly in return. The specific acknowledgement of a man receiving something he understood the full weight of. Dorothy picked up her satchel. She looked at Maya one final time with the warm, complete certainty of a woman who has done everything she came to do. "I am going to get my car," she said. "And I am going to drive back to Sacramento. And I am going to call you on Sunday." She paused. "The way I always called him on Sunday. If that is all right with you." Maya looked at her. "That is more than all right," she said. Dorothy nodded once more. Then she walked across the courthouse plaza into the Los Angeles afternoon, small and upright and entirely herself, the walk of a woman who has delivered what she carried and is going home. Maya watched her go. Then she turned and looked at Junho at the top of the steps. He looked back at her. The afternoon light fell warm and direct across his face, the lean angular face she had been reading for 3 months, the deep-set dark eyes that gave everything they looked at their complete attention. He was looking at her now with that attention fully present and entirely unmanaged, not the almost smile, not the composed stillness, simply himself, the way he had been simply himself in her father's kitchen at the counter with his back to her the morning she came home from the courthouse and stood in the doorway and watched him without announcing herself. She walked up the steps to where he was standing. She stood in front of him in the warm afternoon light with the city enormous and golden behind her, and looked at him directly. He looked back at her. She thought about a corner chair in a hospital room at 2 in the morning. About a man who had sat there all night without being asked and had still been there when she opened her eyes. About a folded piece of paper delivered by someone who had never read it. About a kitchen where the kettle was already on when she came through the door. About a chair chosen beside her instead of across from someone else. About a hand finding hers under the edge of a gallery bench, while her father's words were read aloud in a room full of people. She thought about what it had cost him. The things he had rebuilt differently in the last 3 months. The relationships that had not survived the choice he made in her father's kitchen. The price he had paid without ever asking her to acknowledge it, and without ever suggesting it was more than he had chosen to pay. She had noticed. She had said nothing. She had simply been present for it the way he had been present for her. She reached up and put her hand against his face. He went completely still. Not the managed stillness she had learned across 3 months of watching him move through the world. Something underneath that. Something that had been waiting for exactly this and was receiving it now without any composure between itself and the receiving. She looked at him for a long moment. "Thank you," she said. "For all of it. For every single piece of it." He covered her hand with his, the way he had covered her hand at the kitchen table, and at the gallery bench and every other time she had given him her hand, and he had held it with the complete certainty of a man who understood the value of what he was holding. His voice when he spoke was very quiet. "There is nowhere else I would have been," he said. "For any of it." She looked at him. She believed him the way she believed things that were simply true without needing to examine them. Then she lowered her hand and turned and looked at the city below the courthouse steps. Enormous and golden and going about its life with the magnificent indifference of a place that had seen everything and continued anyway. He stood beside her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The city did not require them to. She thought about the house waiting for them. The kitchen. The grocery list on the refrigerator with its patient smiley face. The drawer beside the refrigerator where the notebook was waiting, where it had been since the evening she put it there after the corridor, after the formal charges, after the moment she had decided it had done everything it needed to do that day and could rest. It had not rested for long. It had gone into a courtroom this morning. It had been heard by a judge. It had been part of what brought Eugene to the consequence of everything she had done. And now it was going home. Back to the drawer. Back to the house her father had built with genuine intention and left to his daughter because she was his daughter, and that was simply the truth of it, simple and permanent and entirely real. She was ready to go home. She looked at Junho. He looked at her. "Let us go home," she said. He nodded once. And they walked down the courthouse steps together into the Los Angeles afternoon, the city spreading below them in every direction, enormous and indifferent and entirely beautiful, holding every story within it without judgment and without ceremony and without asking whether you deserve the one you were living. They came back to the house in the late afternoon, the specific golden hour of a Los Angeles day that has decided to end well. The house received them the way it always received them now, with the warmth of a place that had people in it who belonged there. Maya went to the kitchen. She stood for a moment in the doorway the way she always stood in the doorway of this kitchen, giving herself one breath to simply be in it before she moved through it. The grocery list on the refrigerator. The smiley face at the bottom in her father's handwriting, patient and present and entirely itself. His cup in its place on the counter. The drawer beside the refrigerator closed and waiting. She crossed to the drawer, opened it, took out the notebook. She held it in both hands. Her father's handwriting on the cover. His name in the bottom right corner in the careful, deliberate script of a man who labeled his things because he respected them. She thought about everything this notebook had done, everything it had carried, the dates in the left margin and the questions in smaller letters underneath, and the specific courage of a man who had trusted his instincts and written down what they were telling him, even when he did not want to believe it. She thought about Dorothy driving from Sacramento without asking why. She thought about a courtroom this morning and a judge's voice and the formal language of consequence assembling itself around what had been done and making it permanent. She put the notebook back in the drawer. She closed it. She put her hand on the drawer for one moment. Then she turned back to the kitchen, to Junho at the counter, to the life that was continuing. "That is where it belongs," she said quietly. "In this house. In this drawer. Where he kept the things that mattered." Junho looked at her from the counter. His expression was the quiet, complete certainty of a man who understood exactly what she meant. "Yes," he said. "That is exactly where it belongs." Then Junho made tea the way he always made tea in this kitchen now, with the quiet, practiced ease of a man who knew where everything was kept because he had learned it by being here. And they sat in the living room as the Los Angeles evening came through the windows and settled around them, warm and unhurried and entirely real. They sat among Thomas Johnson's photographs, his face at various ages on the walls around them, his face at the groundbreaking with the hard hat and the uncontainable joy, his face at Maya's graduation with the expression that could not be fully described, his face in a comfortable armchair on what must have been an ordinary Sunday, warm and entirely unbothered, the face of a man who trusted the future completely. Junho looked at the graduation photograph for a long moment. "He told me about that day," Junho said quietly. "The last time I saw him, in the conference room on Wilshire. He said it was the proudest he had ever been of anything in his life." He paused. "He said you looked at him across the stage and he could see that you already knew what you were going to do next. He said that was the thing that made him proudest. Not the degree. That you already knew what came after it." Maya looked at the photograph, at her father's face, at the expression she had spent years trying to describe and had never found the right words for. "He was right," she said softly. "I did know." Junho looked at her. "What was it?" he said. "What did you know you were going to do?" She was quiet for a moment. The evening light moved gently through the windows. "I knew I was going to build something," she said. "Something real. Something that meant what it was supposed to mean." She paused. "I did not know yet what it would look like. But I knew the shape of it. I knew it would have to be honest all the way through or it would not be worth building. Junho looked at her steadily. You built it, he said. She looked at the room around her, at the photographs, at the warm evening light, at the man sitting beside her on her father's sofa in her father's living room in the house her father had built with 30 years of patient, honest work. We are building it, she said. The room was very quiet. The evening held them both without requiring anything further. Then Junho reached over and took her hand. Simple. Quiet. No announcement. Simply his hand finding hers on the sofa between them and holding it with the complete certainty of a man who had made his decision a long time ago, and was done finding reasons to be anything other than certain about it. She looked at their hands, then at him. He looked back at her with the expression that was the most completely unmanaged thing she had ever seen on his face across the entire length of this story, warm and certain and entirely his, the expression of a man who has arrived exactly where he was always going to arrive and knows it. She turned her hand over and held his. The evening kept its warmth around them. Thomas Johnson's photographs kept their patient presence on the walls. Outside, the Los Angeles night was assembling itself in layers of orange and gray, the city going about its enormous indifferent beautiful life below the windows of the house her father had built. It was a good evening. A complete one. The specific completeness of something that has been fought for arriving exactly where it was always supposed to arrive and being allowed to simply rest there, warm and real and entirely present, without being required to be anything more than what it was. Maya looked at the window, at the city outside, at the evening that was settling around this house the way evenings settle around places where people belong. She was home, completely and permanently and without condition. Then she noticed the car. It was parked on the street below, visible through the lower left corner of the living room window, a dark sedan she had not seen before on this street in the 3 months she had been living in this house. It was parked far enough from the nearest streetlight that its details were not entirely clear in the evening dark. But it was there. It had been there long enough that she had looked at it twice without consciously registering it, and was registering it now. She did not move. She did not change anything about the way she was sitting. Junho noticed. She felt the quality of his attention shift beside her, the specific shift from present and settled to present and alert, the shift she had learned to recognize in him across 3 months of living in the same space. He had seen what she was looking at. He had seen it before she mentioned it. He did not look at the window directly. He simply held her hand and looked at the middle distance with the contained professional stillness of a man who has registered something and is deciding what it means. He did not take out his phone. He did not say anything. Neither did she. The car sat on the street below the house in the Los Angeles evening, dark and quiet and entirely without explanation, and the evening that had been warm and complete and entirely settled a moment ago held something underneath it now that had not been there before, something cold and patient and waiting. The man from Maya's past had not gone anywhere. He had simply been watching. And if you stayed with Maya and Junho all the way to the end of part 6, then you already know that this story is nowhere near finished. Eugene has been sentenced. The estate is Maya's. Something real and permanent has been decided in her father's living room tonight. But the car outside that window changes everything. And the man sitting inside it has no idea what he is walking into. If you want part 7 where the past comes through the front door, where Maya Johnson shows exactly who she has become, and where what was built in this house gets tested in the most direct way possible, subscribe right now and drop a comment below. Tell me, do you think the man from Maya's past knows what is waiting for him? The best answer gets pinned. New story every week. And I will see you in part 7.